Having a little bit of technical difficulty still. Hope to have that resolved by Sunday, but we are live streaming tonight. We are looking at Acts the 10th chapter. Again, we're down to verse number 15. And the bulk of this chapter concerns the conversion of what man? Cornelius. Cornelius. And this Cornelius, of course, is going to be the first Gentile convert. This is what we call a transition time. Up to now, for the most part, especially the Old Testament, it's been the Jews. The Jews were the chosen people of God. As we noted, the Gentiles could become proselytes or God-fearers for the Jewish religion, but by and large, they were the chosen people through whom the Messiah would come. And the inclusion of the Gentiles into God's people as equals was going to take some time, I guess is the best way to put that. Transitions can go smoothly, or transitions can go not so smoothly. And this latter is the case with the Jews accepting the Gentiles. If you work in a factory and you get a new foreman or a new boss, that can be a transition time that can be difficult, correct? He's got a new way of doing things, a new set of rules, new methodology, and so forth. And so that can be, that transition can be difficult. We think about those of us who are older and how we've had to adapt to ever-changing technology. And, you know, it hasn't been easy. We don't like to change. But you think about the telephone. We still remember the dial phone. You may remember the crank phone on the wall. My uncle had one of those. And then the corded phone, cordless phone, and now cell phones that'll do just about everything. And so that transitions, like we say, can be difficult. And you put yourself in the sandals of the Jews. I mean, they had been under the guidance of the law of Moses for centuries. And to that, they, of course, had their traditions for centuries. And it's going to take some time and adjusting for them to accept the Gentiles as their equals, as their peers in the body of Christ. So that's what we have in Acts 10. God has Cornelius ready to hear the gospel, and God is now working on Peter to get him ready to go into a Gentile's house and preach the gospel in that setting. God has given Peter a vision, and tell me about this vision. What's that all about? What's happening in that vision that God gives Peter? What's Peter see?
Sees a tablecloth come down.
Sees a sheet or tablecloth come down from heaven, and what's in that?
All kinds of animals.
All kinds of animals, four-footed animals, birds, creeping things. And then the command, verse 13, Peter, get up. You can eat any of these animals you want. You kill them, and you can eat them. And Peter objects. Why? Some of those animals were unclean. Plus, even the clean animals would have been defiled because they had been touching the unclean. And so he says, verse 14, I've never in my life, I've never had a piece of sausage in my life. Never had a bite of pork in my mouth. Never in all my life have I had any catfish. So I'm not going to eat any of these animals. Now remember, with whom Peter is arguing. With whom is he arguing? God. He's arguing with God. God says do this, and Peter says no. And that's never the right response whenever God wants us to do something. But having never had anything unclean in your mouth, and all of a sudden on the spur of the moment, you are given permission to eat this, would there be reluctance on your part? It certainly would have been mine. This has been taboo all my life. Now all of a sudden God says, go for it. Well, there would be some hesitancy, and that's my fault, and Peter's fault too, but nonetheless, it's hard to break with the past and what you have been steeped in all of your life. As we noted though, what God is telling Peter in this vision, Peter doesn't know it as of this verse, God's really not so much talking about food as he is what? People, Gentiles, that's exactly right. He's doing this to get Peter to see, you now have the right to go to the Gentiles. All men are equal under the cross, and all men have a chance at salvation. So we're going to pick up now in verse 15. Angie, if you will, read for us Acts 10, 15 through 18.
And a voice spoke to him again the second time. What God has cleansed, you must not call common. This was done 3 times, and the object was taken up into heaven again. Now while Peter wondered within himself what this vision which he had seen meant, behold, the men who had been sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate. And they called and asked whether Simon, whose surname was Peter, was lodging there.
All right, thank you. Back up to verse 15. God is very gentle with Peter. He could have berated him. He could have, as we would say, chewed him out. How dare you argue with me? But again, this again is a transition time. God knows it's going to take some time for Peter to come around. It's going to take a whole lot more time for some of the other Jews to come around. Some of them never will. But God understands that. He's going to give Peter time to change. And that tells us that we need to give each other time to change. And be patient. God has been patient with us. We want to be patient in our dealings and workings with others. So this was done the second time. Verse 16 says, this was done 3 times. It happened 3 times. And then the object, the vessel, was received up again into heaven. Somebody made this observation that the Lord had given Cornelius instructions 1 time. All it took for Cornelius was 1 time to hear, and he obeyed. It took Peter 3 times before he obeyed. So getting the preacher ready, somebody said, was 3 times harder than getting the sinner ready. But again, it's Peter who's steeped in these laws and traditions.
Is this the same Peter denied Christ 3 times?
Same one, yes. Same fellow.
So he denied him back then.
Right. Another 3 times here, is it?
So it's 3 times here.
3 times again. Some of us are a little bit more hard-headed, right, than others. Maybe Peter was a bit like that. Some raise the question, why didn't God just come right out and say, Peter, the Gentiles are now accepted, instead of going through all this vision and so forth? And I think a good response to that is, if the wall between Jew and Gentile is to be broken down, a part of that breaking down has to do with what you eat and with whom you fellowship. We know that, and Peter knows, he's going to know, that he's going to be criticized for what he does in Acts 10. Jews never went into the house of a Gentile, and they never ate with a Gentile. Now, the reason for that would have been, well, this is meat. Sometimes when you are looking at meat you're about to eat, you really don't know what kind of meat it is. You know it's meat. When we went to the Bible lands, we were given meat on a couple of different occasions. Now, the folks over there said it was beef. But they said everything was beef. Their word for meat is beef. Our word for meat includes beef and any other thing, but I think their word beef meant any kind of meat, and I think we ate camel. I really do. We didn't know what we were eating. I had a lady in New Providence where I preached in Kentucky. They felt sorry for me. I was a bachelor, and they were always fixing food for me and giving me their leftovers. And there was one lady, just a wonderful, sweet, older lady. But she and her husband, I mean, they would eat anything. And she would send food over, and one piece of meat had a leg sticking out of it. I don't know what it was. Rabbit, squirrel, possum, I don't know what it was, but I didn't eat that. My point is, you can look at meat and just by looking at it, not necessarily know is this pork, is it beef, or whatever. So they didn't want to take the chance of that. Plus, the meat, if they were eating with a Gentile, that meat might have been offered to an idol and sacrifice, then turned around and sold in the marketplace. They didn't want to take a chance on that. And probably the Gentiles might not have been as scrupulous in draining the blood from the meat as the Jews would have been. So most Jews just would not take a chance eating with the Gentiles. And so if this wall between Jew and Gentile is to come down, one place to begin is with the eating of clean versus unclean. Now it doesn't matter. That's what all this is going to emphasize. Peter doesn't understand what's happening, verse 17. He just doesn't know. You can't blame him. I mean, we see how easy this is to understand, but we're this side of it all. He's that side of it while it's happening. He really doesn't know why, verse 17, God had given him that vision. He doubts what this vision should mean. Meanwhile, the men sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate. God said, go to Joppa. God didn't give the street address. So, God's not going to do for us what we can do for ourselves. So they made it to Joppa, then they have to ask directions. Now, down in chapter 11, verse 11, chapter 11, verse 11, one chapter over, this is Peter rehearsing in the Jewish council here what had happened immediately. And I'm emphasizing verse 11, the word immediately. After that vision happened, chapter 10 doesn't tell us this, but chapter 11 does. Immediately, there were 3 men come to the house where I was, sent from Caesarea to me. And my point is the timing of all this. Peter has the vision, and right then, after the vision, somebody knocks on the door. Now, if those 3 men had come, say, an hour earlier than he had the vision, probably those Gentiles would not have been allowed in the house. Had they come an hour after the vision, Peter might not have put 2 and 2 together. This is the providence of God at work. No sooner than he has the vision, they're knocking on his door. This will help him understand what the vision then is all about. So these men, 3 men, 1 is a soldier, correct? And 2 are servants of Cornelius. They're asking for, is this the right house? We want to make sure we've all gone to the wrong house, right? And embarrassed ourselves at times. And so they make sure this is Simon's house, or rather, Simon the tanner's house. We've got 2 Simons, right? Simon the tanner owns the house. Simon Peter is staying with Simon the tanner. So verse 18, they call, is this the right house? Is this where Simon, who's also called Peter, is this where he is staying? Remember, these 3 men are Gentiles. They're standing before a Jewish home. They're not about to set foot in that house without permission. They know better. Okay, up to now, this is completely foreign to us. But this is something that was very real to them. So is this the right house? Well, verse 19, let's see, Adam, read for us verses 19 through 24.
And while Peter was pondering the vision, the Spirit said to him, behold, 3 men are looking for you. Rise and go down and accompany them without hesitation, for I have sent them. And Peter went down to the men and said, I am the one you are looking for. What is the reason for your coming? And they said, Cornelius, a centurion, an upright and God-fearing man who is well spoken of by the whole Jewish nation, was directed by a holy angel to send for you to come to his house and to hear what you have to say. So he invited them in to be his guests. The next day he rose and went away with them, and some of the brothers from Joppa accompanied him. And on the following day they entered Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends.
Okay, very good. Back up to verse 19, Peter's pondering. What does all of this mean? And then the Spirit speaks. Well, there are three men, Peter, who are looking for you. And so, verse 20, go and meet them. Go down and go with them. Do not doubt. Had God not spoken, there would have been a lot of doubting going with these Gentiles. That's something, again, a Jew simply did not do. But God says, Peter, I have sent these men. Peter goes down, verse 21. I'm Peter. Why? Natural question, why have you come? What can I do for you? They relate what their mission is. We've been sent by Cornelius. They tell him he's a centurion. Peter hears the word centurion. He automatically knows this man is a Gentile. He is a just man. We talked about Cornelius' qualities last week. He is a God-fearing man. The nation of the Jews respects him, a respected man, a good man. And God told him through an angel to send for thee into this house and to hear words of thee. You're supposed to come back with us, Peter, to Cornelius' house, and you're supposed to tell words from God to Cornelius. Well, verse 23, then called he, who's the he? Peter, right? They're looking for Peter. He's talking to them. He calls them in and gives them, no doubt, a meal and a place to stay. Whose house is this? Simon the Tanner. This is not Simon Peter's house, but Peter's doing the inviting in. Come in, have a meal with us, and spend the night. We would not dare, if we were visiting, if I was visiting one of you, and somebody knocks on your door, and I were to say, come in, folks, have a meal, stay all night with James Delaney. I wouldn't do that. We don't do that. But this is a culture where hospitality is just about sacred. It was commonplace to invite people in not only for a meal, but to spend the night. And to, again, show this hospitality. The Spanish statement, mi casa is su casa, means my house is your house. Evidently, that's what Simon the Tanner told Simon Peter, and that's what he's telling these men. Come on in and stay a while. The most shocking thing is a Jew is inviting who in? Gentiles in. A Jew is inviting Gentiles into his house to spend the night. The question might be raised also, why did they not leave right then? Why not? We're supposed to go see Cornelius. We'll just go right now. Well, Peter might not be as young as some of these men who traveled to him are. He might not be as agile as them. Keep in mind, we're talking 30 miles. These men have made an all-night journey. They're probably tired, and so nothing wrong with getting some rest, staying the night, and we'll head that way tomorrow. Plus, Peter has to round up some fellows to go with him. Chapter 11 says 6. That will take a little bit of time, correct? I mean, you don't just knock on somebody's house and say, go with me. We're going to be gone a few days. So he's going to have to find 6. Why do you think Peter is taking these fellows with him? These will be Jews, by the way, going with Peter.
Be a witness.
Be a witness, exactly right. Peter knows this is not going to set well with a whole lot of Jews. And I want more than just my word. I want to have some witnesses. The Old Testament said, by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. Peter doubles and triples the number. I'm taking 6 with me. And Peter's word plus these 6 will carry a lot of weight when they have to go to Jerusalem and explain all of this. So that's, as Ted has well said, these are going to be witnesses to what is about to take place. It'll take these men a little bit of time to get their things together. So again, that's why, more than likely, some reasons why they don't just leave that night and they'll head out tomorrow. now 24. Adam, where'd you read through?
I read through
25.
I read through 24.
All right, let's get 24 then. So, the morrow after, verse 23, they leave. Verse 24 is the day after they leave. They enter Caesarea. We've got 10 men traveling in this group, 10 men. 6, Peter's taking 6 with him, so that makes 7, correct? Peter plus 6 is 7. And then Cornelius is 3 men, so 3 and 7, we've got 10 men in this group. 3 are Gentiles, and 7 of them are Jews. And they travel out. Sort of wonder what they talked about. You're talking about 30 miles, probably walking. You're going to be silent the whole 30 miles? I doubt it. You're going to talk about things, and maybe talk about God and religious matters. And they would spend the night somewhere along the way. But eventually they arrive in Caesarea. Verse 24 says, Cornelius was expecting them to come. He was waiting on them. That shows faith, doesn't it? Shows a lot of faith in Cornelius, in Peter responding to the message. He's expecting them to come, and they come. And verse 24 says that not only is Cornelius there, he has his family there, and close friends are there also. Which again speaks well of Cornelius, the respect people have for him. At the invitation, they're glad to come. He's a good man. He didn't order them to come, he invites them to come. There they are, waiting. All right, Angie, 25 through 29.
As Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter lifted him up, saying, Stand up, I myself am also a man. And as he talked with him, he went in and found many who had come together. Then he said to them, You know how unlawful it is for a Jewish man to keep company with or go to one of another nation. But God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Therefore I came without objection as soon as I was sent for. I asked then, For what reason have you sent for me?
Okay, very good. Back up to verse 25. Peter is coming in the house of Cornelius. Once again, Peter is coming in the house of a Gentile. We don't know. You wonder about things. You wonder if Cornelius had ever had a Jew in his house, in his lifetime. If he ever had a Jew cross the threshold of his house. The Jews felt for them to enter the house of a Gentile made them ceremonially unclean. Somebody read for me John 18, verse 28. John 18, verse 28, which will underscore the feeling of the Jews toward the Gentiles and the uncleanness attached with that. John 18, 28.
Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled but could eat the Passover.
There is a prime example of this, of course, during the trials of Jesus. Here they are with murder on their minds. Well, all they're worried about is we don't want to be unclean. That seems to me to be the least of my worries if I were them, but that, again, emphasizes the fact that to be associated with Gentiles made them unclean. But again, Peter does not hesitate. And this could very well have been the first time he had ever crossed the threshold of a Gentile's house. Is Cornelius happy that Peter is there? Yes. That's putting it mildly, correct? Overjoyed, elated, so much so that Cornelius, verse 25, meets Peter, falls down at his feet, and worships him. The amazing thing about this, a lot of amazing things about this, we're talking about Cornelius being a Roman soldier. More than that, a Roman military officer. He is used to people bowing to him. Here he bows before Peter, a Jew, a Gentile bowing to a Jew, the conqueror bowing to the conquered. Rome occupied the land. One would expect this to be the other way around, but Cornelius falls at Peter's feet and worships him, and Peter says, "Keep it up, Cornelius. I deserve this worship." Is that what he said? Not hardly. Verse 26, Peter lifted him up, saying, "Get up, stand up, I myself also am a man." Peter sees the centurion has gone way too far in this. It's not just showing respect. He is being revered in this guide to worship. Peter wants none of that. Stand up, get on your feet. Cornelius, I'm a man just like you're a man. I'm no better than you are. We're on the same level. We are equals. When it comes to who is to be worshiped, what does the Bible say? Jesus said to the devil, when the devil tempted him, Jesus' response was, "Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." Who else did we study about not too awfully long ago? Made the mistake not once but twice of bowing before an angel. Book of Revelation. John. Twice. Revelation 19 and Revelation 22. He bowed before an angel, and the angel said, "Don't do it. Stand up. Get up, John." That's what Peter's saying here. Get up, Cornelius. I'm just a man. I'm not a God. I'm not worthy of worship. I'm just as you are. The amazing thing about this is that Peter refused the worship of Cornelius, but his so-called successors, what about them? You know, the successors of Peter are said to be the popes. Whenever the Pope comes into town, does he tell folks, "Get on, get off your knees, get up. I'm a man just like you are"? He doesn't say that. He doesn't say that. Doesn't say that at all. I read an article. It was about proper etiquette. If you ever meet the Pope, how you're supposed to act. So I wanted to share this with you because I know you're dying just to have this encounter. And we're not being disrespectful here, but at the same time, we're speaking a bit frankly here. If you have a meeting with the Pope, if you somehow, we're not going to, believe you me, we're not, but if you were to, you want to wear your best. You don't go in with a t-shirt and blue jeans. Suit, tie, shoes polished, women a dress, arms have to be covered, and the hemline below the knee. Hemline below the knee. When he enters the room, you stand and applaud. If he approaches you, you bow at the knee. If he offers your hand, if you're a Catholic, what do you do to the ring? Kiss the ring. If you're non-Catholic and don't want to kiss the ring, you're welcome to shake his hand. You call him your holiness or Holy Father. You don't say, "Hey, Pope, how you doing?" It's your holiness or Holy Father. All of this tells us how far removed that is from Peter. How far removed that is from Peter, just a man not worthy of worship. We don't disrespect anybody. We don't mean to do that. But we're just all human beings on the same level of sinners, and that includes the Pope and anybody else. In our Bible land trip, we went to Rome and we went to the Vatican. Most people don't realize that the Vatican is its own country. While it is in Italy, it actually is its own country, and it governs itself. But we were allowed to go to the Vatican, And there in St. Peter's Basilica is a statue of St. Peter. And you can touch that. And through the years, people have kissed the toe of Peter so much and so many times, guess what? The toe is gone. It's a part of the foot. Most people today just rub his feet. They don't kiss it, but whatever you want to do. They've done that so many times, they've actually rubbed the metal off. And the toe is just blended in now. It's just like a grotesque foot. You will also, they have a spot where they say Jesus was born, and there'll be people on their knees kissing that spot. Now, I don't know with COVID if that's sort of quietened that down or not, but you're talking about an unsanitary thing to do. When we were at the Vatican, we saw the building where the Pope only comes out in one room when he's there, and he waves at the people, and he wasn't there when we were there, but we saw the room where he normally comes out. And again, it's just so far removed from Peter's response here. I'm just a man like you're a man. And that ought to tell us something, I believe. 27, they talk. He talked with them. Peter goes in, and probably Peter's a bit astonished. He expects Cornelius to be there, probably his family, maybe some servants, but there's a house full of people there. He finds many who had come together. Verse 27. And now, we're talking about this occurring in the space of a little over 3 days. Think of how much Peter has changed from that day to 3 days or 4 days later. He said to them, verse 28, "You know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation." He's basically saying, it's not right for me to be here among you Gentiles. That's the way it has been. But God has shown me what? In that vision that Peter had, he didn't see any men in that vision, did he? All he saw were animals and birds. But Peter says here, God has shown me that I should not call any man. Peter now understands the purpose of the vision, doesn't he? It wasn't so much about animals and clean or unclean as it is about people. That there's no such thing this side of the cross as people who are profane or unholy or anything of that nature. Everybody is one. Everybody is equal this side of that. And so this is opening the door for the Gentiles, as we've seen the Gospels for all. It is for the Jew, it is for the Gentile, it does not matter. So 29, when you sent for me, I came. The King James says, I came to you without gainsaying. Gainsaying. That is also translated
Without objection.
objection. Okay. Gainsay is an old English word that means literally to speak against. Peter came without speaking against, without answering back, is the idea. He didn't raise any objections to going with him. There were no arguments that he leveled. I came. I was willing to come as soon as I was sent for. And so again, verse 29, I really don't know why I'm here. Why am I here? Why did you send for me? Adam 30 through 33.
And Cornelius said, 4 days ago about this hour, I was praying in my house at the 9th hour, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing, and said, Cornelius, your prayer has been heard, and your alms have been remembered before God. Send therefore to Joppa and ask for Simon, who is called Peter. He is lodging in the house of Simon, a tanner by the sea. So I sent for you at once, and you have been kind enough to come. Now therefore we are all here in the presence of God to hear all that you have been commanded by the Lord.
Take you back up to verse 30. Remember that the Jews counted part of the day as a day. Okay? When Jesus was in the grave, 3 days and 3 nights. Well, he was put in the grave on Friday and arose on what day? Sunday, we wouldn't consider that 3 days. We might consider that a day and a half, but the Jews counted part of a day as a day. So Friday was a day, even though it was in the tomb a short time, still Friday was a day, Saturday was a day, and Sunday was a day. The same with Cornelius here. Day 1 would have been the day the angel came to Cornelius. Day 2 would have been the day Peter had his vision. Day 3, the day Peter and them left. Day 4, the day they arrived. So that's though there's really only part of days, the Jews counted part of the day as a day. So 4 days ago I was fasting and I was praying at the 9th hour, about 3 in the afternoon, and he relates what happened. A man stood by me in bright clothing. Cornelius, 31, your prayer has been heard. Your charitable deeds, God knows all these good things that you have done and are doing. And your job then is now to send to Joppa and call to here Simon, whose name is Peter. He's staying with Simon the tanner by the seaside. When he comes, he's going to speak to you. So that's why I sent for you, verse 33. I did this immediately. I want to take care of this now. And thank you for coming. And thou hast well done that thou art come. Now therefore are we all here present before God to hear all things that are commanded thee of God. This is every preacher's dream come true, to hear these words. We are here. We're all here. Wouldn't it be great if we could get everybody to come at every service? We are all here. That would be great. We're all here, present before God. We know why we are here. We are in God's presence and certainly in worship. Our purpose hasn't been and is not to please ourselves but God. So we are all here. We are in the presence of God. And we want to hear. We don't want to be entertained. And we don't want to hear what you think. We don't want your opinion. We don't want psychology. We want to hear. We want to hear. We want to listen. When I preached up in Kentucky, there was a school teacher in the congregation, and she would bring her test papers and grade her test papers while I preached. I spent all those hours getting the sermon ready, and I guess she might have been right, she might have been better off. I don't know, but she would grade her test papers while I preached. Would that sting you? I bit my tongue off, but anyway, if we're going to communicate with each other, it takes a speaker, but also what? A listener. A listener. Cornelius says, we're here, and we are here to listen, to hear all things that are commanded thee of God. We want to hear all of it. All things. Don't leave anything out. Peter, we want to know what God has for us. We're out of time. We'll see what God has for the Lord willing next Wednesday, Acts 10, verse 34.